In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the opening 2 minutes of my latest Glass Onion form. In this version, I'm going to be making reference to Mark David Chapman. As I go along, I will be pausing and playing the video in order to point out references and give explanations according to my research. At the end of the breakdown portion of the video, I'm going to play the opening 2 minutes of the Glass Onion form without interruption to see if you can follow along with the discoveries that I have explained and make the correlations between them. All people, places, and things in the movie can take on multiple references within the same movie.
Drellin, are you scared of this place?
No. Scared of nothing here. It's just that, some places are like people.
Hello? Hi, babe.
Some shine and some don't.
Great. Look, I'm at the hotel and I still have an awful lot to go through. I don't think I could get home before 9.
I think a lot of things happen right here in this particular hotel over the years, and not all of them was good.
The cabbie told me that Jimmy Carter stayed at that hotel, and when he was the president, too.
The Glass Onion form is Surreal Cinema, exclusive to Stanley Kubrick's movies, with the exception of both The Wizard of Oz and the Return of Oz movie. Despite the original being made decades before Pink Floyd and the sequel following the original 46 years later and after Pink Floyd, they both sync up to the dark side of the moon. The Glass Onion form starts by taking any Kubrick film and laying it over itself, going forward and in reverse simultaneously. That is called the mirror form. Each video has to be transparent in a semi-solid primary color to create a contrast. In this case, the two colors are green and yellow. The third video in red is a reference video, which can be a movie, documentary, interviews, even music videos. They all sync up.
And not all of them was good.
He told me he did it to show everyone what a regular guy he was.
What about room 237?
Just all the things that meant something.
Room 237?
You're scared of room 237, ain't
A
you?
letter of commendation for my work with Vietnamese children. My passport.
Drellin, what
And a
is
couple
in
of
room
photographs
237?
from my trip around the world.
Nothing.
What was left of my
There ain't
life.
nothing in room 237.
It was all so
But
that
you ain't
when
got
they
no
came,
business going in there anyway.
police or whoever it was going
Stay
to be,
out. You
what
understand?
everyone would
Why
want
don't
to
you
know
want to talk about it?
who I was, who I had become,
I'm not supposed to.
Who
and
said you ain't
maybe
supposed to?
if I found myself unable to speak or something,
Tony,
this would tell them who I was
Who's Tony?
before.
Tony is the little boy that loves my mouth.
Is Tony the one that tells you things?
Yes.
How does he tell you things?
It's like I go to sleep, and he shows me things. But when I wake up, I can't remember everything.
I believe in Holden Caulfield and the book and what it was saying. What it was saying to a lost generation of phony people.
Here we have the first reference. This lake represents a body of water like the Pacific. This little island, which is called Goose Island, it represents Hawaii. Helicopter shot flying over the island and veering to the right is a reference to Chapman flying from Hawaii to the States.
We have arrested Mark David Chapman of 55 South Kukui, Kukui Street, Hawaii, for the homicide
Again, let's focus on the precision here. As soon as it passes the island, it cuts away from the palm trees and back to the detective. Now, I'm going to play the scene over again without interrupting. See if you can catch the precision, even when they say Hawaii.
We have arrested Mark David Chapman of 55 South Kukui, Kukui Street, Hawaii, for the homicide of John Lennon.
If you want to know.
Here we have the murder weapon being shown over an overhead shot of the woods. This is making a reference to Chapman. When he first flew over, he went back to the place where he learned how to shoot. He connected with someone who got him some hollow point bullets.
Chapman had also come to Atlanta for bullets and for target practice in the nearby woods, where 5 years before, Verlin Florence had been his shooting instructor.
Mark Chapman was a little better than average shot. If he were a academically graded student, that would be about a C+ for ability. He was like this distance from me. My grandmother, who has been dead many years, couldn't miss you at this range. The fact that he had any training at all at this range has nothing to do with anything. Where your training is in value is when you go backwards and when that other person can shoot back. Lennon, as far as I know, wasn't armed, was he? No. So was Chapman in any danger? None whatsoever.
He specifically went out of his way to get hollow point bullets.
He returned, this time coming through an intermediate city where he met with someone who was able to supply him with hollow point bullets. He actually went with that individual out into a wooded area and practiced shooting the gun.
I mean, if you really want me to tell you about it, I will. But the first thing you probably want to know is all that stuff about my dad and what he did to my mom and me and all. The whole goddamn childhood.
Mark had a strong Christian upbringing, but he was also a lonely child who would often escape into a world of imaginary people.
There was a whole city of them. They kind of lived in the walls. They were almost microscopic.
Dozens and dozens of people. A whole city full of people.
Hundreds of thousands.
So here were these hundreds of thousands of people, and what were you to them?
I was their king.
King Mark's imaginary world was the only way he could cope with the violent reality of an abusive father.
We had some sporadic violence in the home.
Your father doing things to your mother?
Would strike my mother, and sometimes in the middle of the night I would hear this, and I would run in there and try to break it up.
Dr. Richard Bloom was one of 6 psychologists who examined Chapman in jail soon after the murder.
He talked about himself being abused, hit with a belt, and his mother being abused.
I felt that I almost had to be an emotional, a guardian for my mother.
He attempted throughout his life to cope with his own personal tragedy, trauma, which happens, I believe, relates to the relationship with his father.
But I'm not going to tell you any of that stuff. That stuff isn't important. Not anymore.
This long and windy road is a reference to both Chapman driving up from Atlanta to the Dakota in New York, and to Jack Jones driving to Buffalo, New York to interview Chapman.
I just got depressed again, quit my job, bought a gun, and came over here and killed somebody. That's what happened. From heaven to hell in about a month.
In November 1980, Chapman arrived back in Atlanta. He'd just spent a week in New York, waiting in vain to see John Lennon.
The last time I heard from him was in November or in the first week of December. I remember on the phone he said, "I won't be back through here again." And I said, "What do you mean? You won't be back into the States," meaning from Hawaii again. And he said, I just don't think I'll be back through Atlanta again. And he said, "I'd like to get together." And I thought we could talk over old times. And I was very uncomfortable with that. I felt like, why do you want to talk about old times? You know, this is now, those were then. I thought that was all settled. I thought that was all settled. And he got very upset, and he said, "Aren't they important to you?" I remember him almost at the point of tears, you know. It was very emotional for him. Aren't they important to you? So that was the time that last I could have seen him. And I guess we never said goodbye.
But 10 years later, Chapman offered one journalist the story of a lifetime.
One day I received a short letter asking me to visit him at the prison. When I arrived there, he handed me a note saying that it was like a one-sentence statement, "I'm sorry I killed John Lennon." And I said, "Mark, if you're serious, then we should sit down and talk about it and write something meaningful." And he said, "Well, I'll pray about that." He never makes the smallest decision without consulting with God. A couple days later, I got another letter saying, "Come back to the prison." He wanted to sit down and do some interviews.
That covered exactly 2 minutes of the beginning of The Glass Onion. Now I will play those 2 minutes uninterrupted.
I believe in Holden Caulfield and the book and what it was saying. What it was saying to a lost generation of phony people.
We have arrested Mark David Chapman of 55 South Kukui, Kukui Street, Hawaii, for the homicide of John Lennon.
If you want to know, if you really want me to tell you about it, I will. But the first thing you probably want to know is all that stuff about my dad and what he did to my mom and me and all. The whole goddamn childhood. But I'm not gonna tell you any of that stuff. That stuff isn't important. Not anymore.
That will conclude the first 10 minutes of the first 10-minute video. So if you found this interesting, then the next step is to watch the full video of the first 10-minute Glass Onion breakdown. It's full of so many references that should answer many questions about the various anomalies in the movie. Then you'll be ready to watch the full movie in Glass Onion form.
Do you know how I knew your name was Doc? You know what I'm talking about, don't you? I can remember When I was a little boy, my grandmother and I could hold conversations entirely without ever opening our mouths. She called it shining. And for a long time, I thought it was just the two of us that had the shine to us. Just like you probably thought you was the only one. But there are other folks, though mostly they don't know it or don't believe it.